evening, everyone. Good evening from Vietnam and good morning, good afternoon from different parts of the world. We are very thrilled to have you back today to our webinar series sponsored by ProEd Education Solutions and EduVerse. It's my honor again. My name's Han Nguyen, that most of you might have known. I'm the host of this series, and it's my honor to be back here with you today in a Friday evening, welcoming a lot of people from different corners of the world. I can see that we have people from the Philippines, our very close friends, from Venezuela, from Peru, from different parts, and it's a blast. So thank you again for making your time to join us in this webinar series. Okay. So before we dive into our main topic today, let me just quickly introduce our esteemed presenter, Mr. Mike Mayer. Mr. Mike Mayer is the Senior Director of the Global Scale of English at Pearson. He has a BA in French and Masters in English and Applied Linguistics from Cambridge University. With years of teaching and publishing expertise, Mr. Mike will definitely bring invaluable insights to this session today. Now, a word about EduVerse, the driving force behind today's webinar. Powered by ProEd Education Solutions, EduVerse PD Network is a platform for global educators to share and get shared all about education. EduVerse is committed to providing educators with invaluable learning opportunities and resources. From monthly newsletters on cutting-edge educational trends to live webinars every 2 months, we're dedicated to your professional growth, all at free of charge. Are you looking for ways to enrich your approach to language teaching and empower learners in the classroom? Today, Mr. Mike Mayer will help us explore the motivations behind creating the GSE, the powerful impact emotions have on language learning, and discover practical techniques to boost learning confidence using the GSI framework. After the webinar, please take a moment to complete a short survey to help us serve you better. After that, you will receive an email with instruction to download your certificates within 1 day. Without further ado, let's immerse ourselves in this enlightening webinar. Feel free to ask questions and observe all you can from this session. Thank you. And Mr. Mike Mayer, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Okay, 1 second. Okay, can you just confirm that you can all see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can all see it perfectly.
Yes, you can. Okay, great. So thank you and welcome to this session. Thank you to EduVerse for inviting me to present on one of my favorite topics. So today what I want to do is start off with a little bit of a story about the learning journey, and then talk to you a bit about how and why we developed the Global Scale of English, a map for following this learning journey. Then we'll look more closely at, what do we mean by building confidence? And then I want to give you some practical ways in which you can use the Global Scale of English to support you in building learner confidence. So we've got a lot to get through, so let me crack on. Okay, a journey. Let me start with a story. So I originally come from the north of England, and as a child, every year we would head to the south of England. If anybody's been to the UK, Bournemouth, it was a very exotic location for us as children. It was in the south, it was warmer, but it was a long way. And so when we were looking to plan that journey, a lot of questions going through our head. First of all, we selected obviously the destination, and then we needed to know, what is the best route to take to get from my hometown to Bournemouth, and then more detailed, like exactly how do we get there? And as children, the key question was always, how long is it going to take, and when will I get there? And so You know, when I was a child, we had to rely on printed maps. Today, much easier with GPS and all the devices that we have in cars. So you can see my hometown, Preston, going down to Bournemouth. You can see there we have an estimate. It's going to take 4 hours, 39 minutes. And if we drill in to the GPS, we get really detailed information about which road to take, when to turn off, when to take a diversion. And it looks like it's foolproof, but sometimes we make mistakes. And so that intelligent GPS system can then recalculate and get you back on the right route to arrive at your destination. And so for me, this is very similar to planning the learning journey, right? So we want to know, like, what is my goal? What am I learning English for? How good do I need to be? And then I need to start looking at the route. So where am I starting? What do I need to do next? How do I keep on the right track? A key question, am I getting any better? Am I making any progress? And then what do I do if I somehow am having problems? How do I remediate? And I think a lot of learners have that key question, how long is this going to take? And as educators, you know that the answer is it's going to take quite a long time. But, you know, we have to message that in a way that is palatable for our learners, because they don't want to know that it's going to take years and years and years and years and years to get fluent in English, as I'm sure you've all spent your lives learning English and becoming proficient in English. So that's my analogy for the learning journey. And what we wanted to do is, and what we need to do is develop a roadmap for that journey. So when I was a teacher, which was, you know, a long time ago, we're talking the 1980s, we just had language proficiency defined in very general terms, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Okay. And then a bit later in the 90s, we started adding extra levels. So we had beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, upper intermediate, and advanced, because there was an acknowledgement amongst educators that actually intermediate, that word intermediate, just covers so many different levels. There are different levels of intermediate. And it was problematic as a teacher, but also as a publisher, to know, is my intermediate book the same as an intermediate book from a different publisher? So is the Pearson intermediate the same as the Oxford or the Cambridge or the Macmillan intermediate textbook? And the problem there was no real common standard to define exactly what we meant by intermediate. And then along came this little book called the Common European Framework, or CEFR. And this was published in 2001. And I think it's safe to say that it really changed the approach to measuring language proficiency and to teaching language proficiency. And I just want to check with the audience, because I know you're all around the world. We've got a quick poll for you. If you just want to vote in the poll, and that will come up on your screens very soon. How well do you know the Common European Framework? So if we could launch the first poll, please. And then people can vote. I know it well. There you go. I know it very well. I know a bit about it. I've heard of it, but I don't really know it, or I've never heard of it. There is no wrong answer. Just be honest. It will help me gauge your level of knowledge. If you've never heard of it, it's not a problem. You don't need to have known of it to benefit from this webinar. So you let me know when we can show the results. Everybody voted. Okay, let's show the results because we've got a lot to get through. So the results will be coming on our screen very soon. Okay, so we've got about more people who don't really know it than people who do know it, but that's okay. That's fine. So let me see if I can move on. Okay, so if you don't know about it, you don't really know it, you're going to have to guess this. But which skill in the Common European Framework has the most information? We've got another quick poll here. Okay, is it listening? Is it reading? Is it speaking? Or is it writing? Obviously, if you've never heard of it, you're just going to have a guess. Just give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, let's not dwell too long on this one. Can we see the results just to get an idea of what people think? Okay, so it's kind of split between speaking and reading. Excellent, thank you. So it's actually speaking. So the Common European Framework had about 65%, so 2/3 of all the information is about speaking, which is great because most learners want to be able to speak in the foreign language. But certainly as a teacher, as a publisher, we want to cover the other skills as well. And so even though the Common European Framework was being used around the world, not just in Europe, we wanted to build on it so that we have more information to cover all of the 4 critical language skills. And then the last little question on the Common European Framework, again, if you've never heard of it, you can just guess, but how many levels are there in the Common European Framework? The poll should come on your screen pretty soon. Are there 6? Are there 7? Are there 10? Or are there 11? 6, 7, 10, or 11? Okay. And again, you either know or you don't know. So let's see what the results say from the audience. Okay, so almost half say 6, a third say 7, and then about 20% say 10, and 5% 11. Okay, so for the people who know the Common European Framework, I'm guessing that they have said there are 6 levels. And so there are 6 levels, A1, A2, which is your basic level, B1, B2, covering the intermediate, independent and intermediate level, and then C1, C2, which is a proficient user. But I would say that's not actually the right answer. Because if you look at the Common European Framework, there are actually 10 levels. And those levels of A2, B1, and B2 are actually divided into 2 levels. And I'm making this point not because of a technicality, okay, but because it reflects how quickly learners can progress between the different levels of the Common European Framework. So if you're in a country where you're using the Common European Framework, you've probably noticed that it's relatively quick to move a learner from A1 to A2. But then it seems to get slower to go from A2 to B1. And it gets slower still to move from B1 to B2. And there are many reasons why that's the case. But one of the reasons is A2 is not the same size as A1. There's a lot more to cover in that A2 level, which is why it's divided into A2 and A2 plus. So I think it's important to acknowledge those upper levels and to know that A2, B1, and B2 are actually 2 levels each. So the Common European Framework developed in Europe for all European languages, but then adopted around the world because of the particularly English courseware that was being sold around the world, and all publishers use the Common European Framework to create their materials. But there are a few limitations for us as publishers and for some of our customers. One is that it mainly focuses on general English, and we have customers who need business English or academic English. It was written for adults and young adults. It was never created for young learners. And so we publish a lot of courseware for young learners. We needed a similar framework for young learners. We've already seen that a lot of information was about speaking, and we wanted to cover all the skills. And then those levels, even if we're saying 10 levels, they are quite wide, and it can take a long time to move between levels, particularly the B1 to B2. And so if you're using Common European Framework A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2 to demonstrate progress, it's really difficult to show that a learner is making progress on a regular basis, because it takes years to move to another level. And then finally, another reason for creating the global scale of English was because teachers actually found it quite difficult to use the Common European Framework. So we wanted to create tools, we wanted to create resources that really made it easy for a teacher to use our frameworks in day-to-day teaching. And you'll have seen when you registered that EduVerse has packaged up a little goodie bag for you of lots of free tools and resources that you can use after this webinar to work on when you're doing your day-to-day teaching. So we've created 5 different frameworks based on the Common European Framework methodology, but targeting different learners. So pre-primary, so from age 3, 4, 5, young learners from 5 to kind of 12, 13, adults learning general English, adults learning academic English, and adults learning business English. And we also, and this is also in your goodie bag, we also have a toolkit, which is an online database, which contains all of those learning objectives. It contains grammar, it contains vocabulary for adults, vocabulary for young learners, and it creates a text analyzer, all of which give you information and practical tools to use if you're planning, lesson planning, assessing learners using the global scale of English. So if you want to look at the PDFs, and again, you are going to be given the PDFs after this webinar, what you'll see is they are lists of learning objectives that learners can be expected to achieve at different levels of proficiency. So you see there's an example at A2, speaking, A2, and not A2 plus. So this is the lower half of A2, and it's at GSE level 30. And so these learning objectives can be used for lesson and curriculum planning and for assessing learners. And there are various codes in there to say that they've come from different frameworks, or if they were created by Pearson. So a key point, especially for people who know the Common European Framework and who are using the Common European Framework, the global scale of English is based on the Common European Framework. It contains all of the Common European Framework in the adult, academic, and business frameworks. Okay. The scale, proficiency scale, which you see there, 10 to 90 on the right-hand side of the screen, is based on the same underlying scale from the Common European Framework. So when that research was carried out, the data was analyzed, and you can see those numbers that are clearly from an academic piece of research, from minus 5.39 to 3.8. That is the data underlying the Common European Framework. We've taken that data and we've transposed it onto a positive scale. You don't want to tell a learner your level is minus 3.23. That's not motivating. But if we work hard, we can get you to minus 2.21. No, minus 3.23 is exactly the same as 30 for the global scale of English, which is exactly the same as the very beginning of A2. Okay, and when you get to 43, you are at the very beginning of B1. So you can see, you can map progress 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, etc., numerically. You can see that progress and measure that progress more regularly using the number scale of the global scale of English. And like the Common European Framework, the global scale of English is effectively just supporting teachers to put into practice best practice learning, teaching, and assessment. So as we'll see in the next part, you need to place students correctly at the beginning of the class. You want to plan your class, you teach to your lesson plan, then you check regularly on a lesson by lesson basis that the information has been understood. And if it hasn't been understood, you repair, you remediate, you revise your plan, and then you do your next lesson. And this circle is supported by various assessments and various courseware that we create at Pearson, but this is not a commercial sale, so I'm just going to move on. But this is how we use the global scale of English at Pearson. So let's move on to confidence. What is confidence? So this is just one definition of confidence, that combination of hope, optimism, and resilience, a belief that you can be successful and reach your goal. Okay, and a key word in this definition is resilience, perseverance, that ability to stick with something that is maybe it's challenging, it's a bit difficult. Nobody says learning a language is easy, but you learn to carry on even if you're having a little fails along the way. And when it comes to learning English, and I think it's particularly English around the world, very often the stakes are really high. So it can mean the difference between getting a job and not getting a job, passing your end of school exam, getting a visa to go and live in another country, getting a place at a university, getting a promotion, even traveling around the world. Okay, that's maybe low stakes. But the other reasons why people are learning, there's a lot of pressure. And when there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of emotion. So what emotions have you experienced when learning something new? We can do that in chat if you want to pop your emotions in the chat for learning something new. I see anxiety. Yep, nice one. Anxiety, excited, frustration. Yes, excited. Keep putting them in. We did some social media. We asked the same question on social media, and yes, some people had positive emotions, so excited and sort of inspired and optimistic, but the majority of emotions were quite negative. So frustration, embarrassment, they feel pressured, They feel foolish speaking in a different accent and a different language. The fact that they cannot make themselves understood. And negative emotions have a negative impact. There's a lot of research to show that a negative emotion it will stop you from reaching your potential, because that fear blocks you from moving to the next stage. And last year, actually the end of the year before, but published last year, we did some research into people using English around the world. These were people who were at work and using English in their jobs. And we asked them, how confident do you feel being able to speak, write, listen and read in English? And so there's a quick poll here. What percentage of people do you think said that they felt confident in all of those 4 skills? Was it 25, 35, 45, or 55% of the people that we asked? Just give you 10 seconds to register. Okay, let's see the results, see what people said. And the results say, okay, about a third 25, a third 35, quarter 45, and then about 10% thought it was 55. Okay. It was actually only 1 in 4 people felt confident in all of those 4 skills. And so if you think about those 4 skills, which do you think they felt most confident in? Were they most confident in listening, reading, speaking, or writing? So you have a quick poll there. Again, which do you think they felt most confident in? Right, shall we see the answer? See what you thought? Okay, again, third, listening, kind of 40% reading, 15% speaking, 16% writing. Okay, well, yes, you most people got it. So reading, people felt most confident in reading, and then listening, and then probably not surprisingly, those skills where you have to produce were those where learners of English felt least confident. And if you think about the working environment, very often the speaking part is the most important. And so if you're not confident, it means you're not speaking, which means you're not actually contributing possibly as much as you could. So how then do we build confidence with the global scale of English? And I think the idea of building confidence in learners, I don't think anybody on the call would say, no, I don't think that's important. Yes, obviously, we want to have confident learners. But the problem with the word confidence is people associate it with a personality type. Some people are confident, some people are not confident. And actually, I mean, I think there's an element, like people can be more outgoing or more reserved, but actually that's not directly linked to confidence. And so there are a number of techniques that can be used to build confidence. And so I'm going to start with this summary slide, and then I'm going to go into each of these and then show you how the global scale of English can help you put these concrete actions into practice. So the first thing, as I mentioned on the best practice learning, teaching and assessment, the first thing is to place people correctly at the beginning of a course. And a lot of research showing that placement is key to end success. And one of the reasons for this is you need to know where a learner is starting in order to be able to know where to take them next. because learners need to be working within what we call the zone of proximal development. So they need to be challenged, but they need to be challenged just the right amount, not too much. They won't be able to do it. They'll fail. They'll get demotivated. Not too easy because they're going to think, oh, this is easy, but actually they're not making any progress. So that's the first point. The second point is learners need to be working towards clear goals, and they need to be working towards what we call SMART learning objectives. And I'll talk a little bit about what SMART means if you don't know, and then show you that actually the Global Scale of English is a framework of SMART learning objectives to work towards. And if we're working towards these goals, we're then able to measure progress against these very clear goals. Thirdly, there is nothing more motivating than success. So students and learners need to have evidence that they're making progress and need to experience success regularly along that journey. It's going to take years. So we can't wait until the end of the year to show somebody that they've, been successful. This needs to be a regular demonstration of progress being made. And I'll show you how we can do that with the Global Scale of English. And then finally, kind of bringing all of these together is this idea of building a growth mindset. And if you're not familiar with that term, I'll explain a little bit what growth mindset means. Tie in the ideas of reflection and feedback. So the first one, we've placed people at the beginning of a course, and then we need to identify what are we going to teach them next within that zone of proximal development. So what is the right level of challenge? So I've got my student, or I've got my group of students, and by the end of this academic year, I want to get them to a GSE 35, 37, kind of a mid A2. Okay. I've placed them, and they are currently a high A1. So they're around 28 on the Global Scale of English. So with those two data points, I can identify that my zone of proximal development for this class and the optimal learning zone for this class is around 30 to 38. Notice it's not 28. They're already at 28. They can do things at 28. We're starting a little bit higher so that there's always a little bit of challenge. And then we're going a little bit beyond our target goal because some students will excel and others won't get there, but we need to make sure that everybody is being given a little bit of challenge. So I mentioned the database that we're going to share with you. You can put this into that database. So my zone is 30 to 38. You see that there. I'm teaching a group of young learners. So I've selected young learners. And it will give me learning objectives that are appropriate to teach at this particular level. And so this is what our authors do when creating Pearson courseware. They look at this zone of proximal development and select appropriate learning objectives. Now, you can see there are 286. That's for all the 4 skills. You will not be able to teach 286 learning objectives in your course. Okay? There's only so much we can give to you to support you. You know your students. You know the needs of your students. You know what your students did in the previous year, I assume. So with that knowledge, you can then go into this database and say, oh yeah, Well, they know that already. So I'm going to select this one, this one, this one, this one. And you can use that for lesson planning, but also broader curriculum planning as well. And by doing that, you're going to ensure that everybody is being appropriately challenged during your course. So if you weren't familiar with the acronym SMART, it means specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely or time framed. So this describes those goals that you're working towards. They can't be vague. They need to be specific. You need to be able to measure them and assess them. It needs to be achievable. Okay. It needs to be relevant to the needs of your learners, and you need to be able to do it within a specified time frame. So these goals may well be some of the goals that you have for your course. For this term's course, by the end of this term, I want students to be able to talk about a favorite hobby. I want students to be able to describe somebody's likes and dislikes, or I want students to be able to give simple directions. Okay. So I would argue that they are quite high-level learning objectives. And actually, you need to break them down because there's a lot of steps before a student can describe somebody's likes and dislikes. And so we break them down into, first of all, they can understand basic phrases about likes and dislikes. They can ask someone about their likes and dislikes in a basic way. And then they can describe someone's likes and dislikes in a simple way. The ones you see on your screen here, these learning objectives, are the SMART learning objectives from the Global Scale of English. The previous ones are from Common European Framework. So what we've done is we've done a lot of the work for educators in breaking those learning objectives down into the smaller steps that you can set for your lessons or for the week's lessons, and that you can measure against, and importantly, be able to give students credit for doing each of those steps. Okay, you don't have to wait until they can talk about likes and dislikes, but they can do it in a basic way, and they can understand the language. You give them credit every step of the way. And we are very strong proponents of sharing learning objectives with the learners. So if you look in our course books, I think I've got a page on the next slide, the learning objectives are called out. As a teacher, share the learning objective with your student at the beginning of every class. That allows them to know what they are focusing on in that class. And as you can see on the screen, there's research to say this does actually impact how well they will retain the information from that class. So if you're not already sharing, and honestly, if it's a really low-level class, you can share that learning objective in the learner's first language. It doesn't have to be in English, but let them know what they're working towards. So you can see here, at the beginning, we might not use exactly the Global Scale of English wording, but we call out the goals and the objectives of this unit. And then importantly, at the end, you need students to reflect on how well do they feel they know what they've been studying? How confident do they feel about the material that you've covered? So that gives you an opportunity to see how the class is performing, but also, again, a lot of research shows that if people reflect on what they're doing, they're more involved in the learning journey. They're taking ownership of their learning. And this is one of those key strategies that you teach nicely alongside everything else about teaching your learners how to learn. And we know in a world that's changing constantly, people will need to go on learning long after the end of formal education. Once they've left school, they'll still need to learn. So it's good to be teaching them these strategies of working towards a goal, a very clearly defined goal, and then regularly reflecting on what has been learned or not, and then acknowledging if something is still a problem and going back, not just page 21, page 22, page 23, page 24, page 25, page 20. Don't just carry on. Reflect, pause and reflect. And then again, nothing inspires more than being successful. Knowing that I'm making progress and I have got evidence that I am making progress. So, quick question for you. I have got these 3 students and I've given them a test, and student 1 has come out as A2, student 2 has come out as A2, and student 3 has come out as B1. So my question to you is, which 2 students are the closest in level? It may sound like a trick question, and that's because it is a trick question. But if you'd like to have a guess in the chat, is it 1 and 2? Is it 1 and 3? Is it 2 and 3? Which 2 are the closest? Okay, I've got a couple of people saying 1 and 2. And honestly, looking at that screen, of course it's 1 and 2. How stupid. However, looking at this screen, it's not 1 and 2. It's 2 and 3. And the reason is, if you're just using A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2 as your measurements, you cannot see where within A2 or where within B1 a student is. So actually learner 2 is at the top of A2 and learner 3 is only just at the bottom of B1. So they're pretty similar in level. And that knowledge is important, because if I'm giving learner 2 lessons which are pitched at the same level as learner 1, they're not going to be making progress as much as they could be, because it's going to be too easy for them. And to my point earlier about A2, A2 plus, B1, B1 plus, if I'd shown you the difference between A2 and A2 plus on the screen, then you would be able to see that 1 and 2 are not actually at the same level. Right, I think this is our last poll, and I'm telling you now, you're going to have to make a guess. But I have got a learner, it's an adult learner, and their first language is very different to English. So depending on what part of the world you're in, you probably know this learner. This learner is not motivated. Okay, they lack motivation. They really don't want to be learning English. And this learner is studying for 2 hours every week. Just 2 hours, not every day, every week. So the poll question, if we could bring the poll up on the screen, please, is how many hours do you think it takes, according to research, to move from the bottom of B1 to the bottom of B2? 200, 400, 600, 800, or 1,000 hours. Unless you've read the research, I'm guessing you're going to have to guess. So have a guess and let's have a look at the results. And the results say, okay, most people think 400 hours, 600 hours. Okay, well, so I didn't just make this up. This is based on research, but it can be as much as 1,100 hours. Motivation plays a huge part in the speed of progress, as does the regularity of the learning. So if it's every day, learning will be quicker. And also unfortunately, the distance of English from a learner's first language, that can always impact as well. So you can see the point I was making before was, if I've got a learner who's tested at the beginning of B1, how many years is it before I can tell them that they're B2? They're going to be B1 every time I test them. B1, 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 B1. So what we set out to do with the global scale of English is to be able to show that people are making progress more regularly. It's not that they are learning faster, although we hope to do some studies around that, because if we motivate people, maybe they will learn faster. Well, I'm not saying the global scale of English is not some miracle product that will make your learners learn faster. No, but we can demonstrate with that number scale, you're 43, you're 46, you're 49, you're 52, you're 55. You're still technically B1, but you can see B143, B146, B149. You're not the same B1. So you can actually see that progress is being made. And then finally, building a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset is probably characterized best by, well, I'm no good at English. You know, I'm sure many of us on the call who are language lovers have said, well, I'm no good at maths. Oh, I'm just no good at science. With that belief that you are somehow born with an ability to learn maths, or you're born with an ability to learn science. Most people in the world have been born with ability to learn a language. So there is absolutely no reason why they cannot learn another language. They've just had bad learning experiences. And this is probably most typical of adult learners who've had bad experiences, probably at school or in the earlier education. When you get to adult, oh no, well, I'm no good at this. No. So a growth mindset, which is what we want, is the belief that actually, if I work hard, I'll be able to do it. I'll be able to make progress. And so there are three kind of key steps to building a growth mindset. We've covered, I think, most of these already, but allowing a learner to experience success and to experience success early on in the journey. So for that first class of the year, you don't want people to be failing. You need to start with success and then build on success. And you work towards these short-term goals and you measure against these short-term goals. We need to encourage reflection, self-reflection, get learners to think about what they're learning and what they've learned, and have they learned it, and other things they're still not unsure about. And have a positive attitude towards mistakes, because we're going to make mistakes, and learners can't be afraid of making mistakes, and we need to be positively encouraging them to experiment with language. And if they make mistakes, it's part of the learning journey. And then I'm sure most of you on the call are aware that feedback is one of the key differences for learners learning. So feedback, targeted feedback, immediate feedback, not, the following week, but immediate feedback, personalized feedback. These all have an impact on the progress learners can make and the confidence they will have moving forward. Now, for measuring progress, yes, you can buy one of these tests now, digital tests. They give you lots of information about the different skills. They give you suggested activities, moving forward. They direct you back to the course book. This is where what you could do to improve. Fine. Contact your Pearson sales rep if you want to look at buying these products. However, it doesn't need to be that sophisticated. So this was a really nice example that I saw in Japan, where the teacher had got the learning objectives for the term, and She asked each of the students to rate their confidence for doing each of these things in English, with 5 being very confident, 1 not being confident. Took them away, used that information to help plan the term. If they were super confident already, why bother doing it? Give it them again at the end, and then give them that original sheet back as well, and get them to compare. And again, tangible evidence that they've grown in confidence and that they've made progress throughout the year. And so, this is how we're using Global Scale of English for our ecosystem at Pearson. This is also how you can use the Global Scale of English in your school, in your class, to put into practice best practice teaching and assessment. And I know we want to have some time for questions, but I just quickly want to show you one last thing, because this is also part of the goodie bag that you're going to be given. And this is about, I would say, developing your confidence around assessment. And particularly if your government and ministry have suddenly set targets on the Common European Framework, and you are not that familiar with the Common European Framework, and they say, we need everybody to be B2 level by the end of secondary education. And you're thinking, what on earth does that mean? And when we're looking at people's levels and measuring proficiency, we're really looking at 2 axes. So how many things can a learner do? But we also need to look at how well can they do them. So what do we have for the quality piece? So we have 2 frameworks, assessment frameworks, which describe proficiency for speaking, writing, listening, reading at those different levels of Global Scale of English and Common European Framework. So what I said, the difference between A2 and A2 plus, A2 plus and B1, how different is accuracy between A2 plus and B1 in speaking? You need to be an assessor, an examiner, a real assessment expert to know that, or you need to have been teaching with the Common European Framework for years and years and years, in which case you've built up your knowledge through practical experience. But as a shortcut, we will be giving you these frameworks which really break down how what performance looks like for speaking and writing, and the criteria for listening and speaking at these different levels of proficiency. And we break A2 into A2, A2 plus, B1, B1 plus, B2, B2 plus. So I'm not quite sure how you're going to get all the resources, but if you want to scan that QR code on your screen, that will take you to our website where you'll be able to find everything. But I think EduVerse will be packaging these up nicely into a little offering for everybody who attended today's webinar. And with that, I will stop sharing, and I will ask if we've got any question. I see maybe there is in the Q&A. So let me go to the Q&A. Okay, so there's a really big one there. How has the development of technology affected learning? Wow. So short answer, it has given educators a lot more information about the learning journey. So the beauty, if you have a class of 30 students, it's very hard to monitor what every single student in the classroom is doing. If they're working digitally, then you have a record of how long people are taking, what they right answers, the wrong answers. So you can personalize learning a lot more closely using technology. As I'm sure you've heard people say, it's data, data, data. We collect a lot of data. Sometimes that's overwhelming, the amount of data we have, but that is definitely the significant game changer. The other thing is that learners have more opportunities to learn independently now with technology, and some of the apps and some of the newer sort of AI technologies are really very impressive, and they're enabling people to learn English independently. In the survey I talked about, over half of the people who are working were learning English using social media and YouTube. They weren't going to tutors, they weren't going to English class because A, they're working, they don't have time, and B, they're working, but they don't have lots of money to pay for a private tutor. So it's had a huge impact. Does GSE include indicators for each level? Yes, it does. Members in the classroom, I can say half of them are around AI. I tried harder to solve and adapt my teaching to all of them, but it's quite challenging to make all of them improve their skills. Yes, the mixed ability classroom, that's a whole other presentation. It's challenging, but I think it's the reality of many, if not most, teachers. I think you can, well, from a GSE, from the learning objectives point of view, one of the things that we have that's different to the Common European Framework is that we build scaffolding into our learning objectives. So, for example, you might have a learning objective about can understand key information in a text, and that will be at B1. At the lower levels, can understand key information in a text given prompts or visual clues. So you can try working towards the same kind of skill, but different levels of learning objective for those students. Also getting the slightly stronger students to pair with the weaker students and encourage some peer learning and peer monitoring and feedback. So I have an adult student who's afraid to speak because she feels unprepared and fears being judged by others. What can I do? Talk to her face to face. If it's one-on-one, it's less threatening. I think we've all been in a situation where you have to speak in front of all your colleagues or all of your classmates who all speak the same first language. And so it's weird that you're speaking this foreign language. Again, there are lots of apps now where you can practice your speaking just with the computer or just with your phone. And maybe that's something to encourage to help kind of build confidence around the pronunciation, because I think that's where people start getting a little bit hung up, is around the pronunciation. Yeah, and if you're in a class, then I think what I said during the presentation was we need to, as educators, just model a good response to mistakes. Like mistakes, what is it, the quote, if somebody's never made a mistake, they've never done anything. Like, you making mistakes is part of learning and part of doing. So I see Ms. Han back on screen. Does that mean my time is up?
You have time for one more question, sir.
Oh, have I? Oh,
yes.
I'm going to close my questions. Right. Oh, some of them are too long, so I'm going to have to read a short one. Can GSE be used for Cambridge exams since CEFA is used for assessment? And if yes, how? Absolutely. So if you remember in the presentation, the Common European Framework, Global Scale of English, they are exactly the same scales. It's just Cambridge, CEFA is a 1A, 2B, 1B, 2C, 1C2, and Global Scale of English is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like numerical. But if you know your GSE 37, you know that on a Cambridge test, that is going to be A2. Okay, so your GSE is more detailed, but you can map it back to Common European Framework and say, okay, 44, they're at the beginning of B1, so they will be B1. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mike Mayer, for your inspiring presentation with informative research. And we know that you've done quite a lot of research into that. So our biggest gratitude to your research.
My pleasure.
And let's look ahead to our next exciting webinar. Please set a reminder for April the 25th, 2024 at the same time, 8:30 p.m. Vietnam time. We'll be diving into another engaging webinar with Dr. Ingrid Lee from Australia. We will explore ways on how to foster creativity in the classroom. Stay tuned for detailed information and registration updates on our EduVerse platform and media in our newsletters. And don't forget to join us on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for more updates and practical teaching ideas.